Right, has everybody got a pen and paper or some kind of device for writing on? Because you're going to need it a little bit later on. Yeah. And you might also get to know the person you're sitting next to as well during this talk. Just a warning. Right, let's begin. So, please excuse the quality of this image. It's from Google Maps, so blame them. This is a random place in the world. I got it from a game called GeoGuessr. Has anyone played GeoGuessr? Okay, be warned, it is highly addictive. And don't start playing it now, please, just for the next... Yeah. I went on there and I was like, I'm just going to find an image for this talk, and then half an hour later, I was still playing GeoGuessr. Anyway, so this is a random place in the world, and we're going to give it a fictional name. So, would anybody like to volunteer a fictional name for this place? Sorry? Placey McBoatface. Right. Okay, this is Placey McBoatface. There is a girl, and she lives here. This is her journey to school. This is what she sees on the way to school. She wakes up in the morning at 5 a.m. She puts on her trousers and a sort of frock. Then she begins her 2-hour journey to school on foot. She walks to school every morning. Despite the long walking journey, she's pleased to be going to school. She picks up her friends along the way. She's pleased because at school she gets a good meal with different vegetables, and she learns how to read and write so she can get a good job in the future. At school, they have several computers that are connected to the internet. She has a mobile phone that also connects to the internet, but Wi-Fi is scarce. We know how that feels. She uses it to speak to other girls and boys all over the world. They share pictures. At school, she has fun and she works hard. Now, this girl is age 12. And she is told by her family that she is going to get married. She's not really even sure what this means. However, she is promised a large party with cake. They don't tell her that she will have to give up school just after her 12th birthday. She gets married just after her 12th birthday. Now, let's imagine that this girl is 18. She now has a daughter who is 6 years old. She hopes that the same thing will not happen to her daughter. But things are changing. She has been very scared. But she would like to be able to have the tools to educate and campaign with all those children that she is connected to around the world, locally and abroad. She wants to inform them that every child has a right to education. She has the opportunity to go back to her old school and set up a club to campaign for young people's human rights to education. So, what might she need to do that? So this is the first opportunity for you to have a little think with your next door neighbour. We're thinking about this girl and what kind of tools she might need to be able to set up a campaign, to campaign with the people in that school and with the people around the world. Have a little chat with your next door neighbour and see if you can come up with some ideas. Right, thank you very much. Thank you. Thanks very much. So I'm really interested to hear what kind of answers, because you know, there's going to be lots of different types of answers, and none of them are wrong, obviously. So who wants to volunteer some ideas? Yeah?
A safe place.
A safe place to work, yes. Thank you. That's a really good one, yeah. Yeah?
Common language.
A common language, great, yeah.
We've got maybe information.
Information, yeah. Did anybody come up with any kind of technological tools? Basic or yeah?
We had art materials so they could make posters locally, and then also, they need to have connectivity.
Okay, great. Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you very much. So a few of you are one step ahead of me. It'll become clear in a minute. So just to give you some context about me and the work that I do, I'm telling you this story because it's very similar to a piece of work that I'm doing at the moment. I'm working with an organization that helps bring awareness to the issue of child marriage, among other issues of young people's human rights. So I work for a digital agency who specialize in designing user experiences. So there's about 20 of us. We're based in Brighton. Most often we work with companies and institutions to develop and mature their digital teams and help organizations understand the processes of user experience design. Recent clients include the University of Portsmouth, the Open University, Pearson, and Penguin Books. So to explain, I'm a content strategist, which means that I deal with the content and the language. So sometimes I call myself a language specialist to people who don't know what a content strategist is. So I help people with their microcopy, with arranging their content. I do information architecture, so looking at the way the information is architected on the page to get the message across. But basically, when it comes down to it, I care about the language that gives clarity to complexity, that makes concepts clearer, richer, and easier to understand. Going back into my past a little bit, many moons ago, I was an instructional designer, which you may have heard of. I worked in the e-learning world, and I took a lot of what I learned in that role out into the world of non-profit organizations, other academic institutions, and big brands like Unison and English Heritage. So basically, I refine and organize language so that it has the best learning outcome, whether the audience is a learner or not. And because I'm a language person, I should clarify that I do work on technological tools, but sometimes when I use the word tools, I don't always mean tools as the nuts and bolts of apps and websites. Language is itself a tool to building shared understanding around a set of concepts. Right, so let's go back to our girl. Oh, that's my office. Yeah, we like to make a mess with post-it notes. So let's go back to our girl. This girl, who is one of many thousands of girls, realizes that through this charity or global movement, she can have an effect on the world around her. She can influence other girls like her to self-organize, to join clubs that campaign for awareness. So as I think it was Hamish, actually, was it Hamish? Said, she needs to be able to tell her story. She needs a consistent set of messages to work with. She needs to know who she is dealing with. She needs the right vocabulary for dealing with publications, with publicity, but also all the various groups and units and people that she has to deal with along the way. So it's using the right vocabulary to speak to them, and she needs a voice for her campaign. That's just from a language perspective, from a content strategist perspective. So all of this is to develop a feeling of inclusivity, a human connection. To create a campaign is to create a culture and a community with a shared language, whether it's digital or physical, or phygital, apparently the word, being the combination of physical and digital. Phygital? Anyone heard of that? Anyway, so Let's zoom out and then zoom back in to this place. Where are we now? Any ideas? I'm talking about that building. Does anybody know this building? It's in London. It's the 10th tallest building in the UK. So now we're in a meeting room right in the top of this building. We have the head of digital development and strategy with us. We have the head of campaigns and brand and marketing and a few journalists. And we've been brought in as a company to overhaul the entire digital offering for this campaigning charity. Let's call the head of digital development Charles. And Charles says, I'm glad you're here. Over the last few months, we've had such a rate of success, we can barely keep up with ourselves. We've even got celebrities like Shakira and Justin Bieber endorsing our campaign. The campaign against child marriage has grown into a worldwide movement. We're flying, but we need the tools to support it. And so I expect him to start talking about newsletter tools, campaign tools. But he writes these 3 questions up on the flip chart behind him. He says, these are the things that we need to clear up. What is confusing? Do you find it difficult to explain? And how would you summarize it? So these 3 questions are very brave questions to ask at a time when there is momentum, when you're doing well and when things are busy. But they are 3 exceptionally important questions to ask yourself, because if you can't answer them, then nobody else can. So now use your pen and paper and have a little think about the project or a tool or something that you're working on, and think about those 3 questions. This is just for your own personal use. I'm not going to ask you for feedback on this. So sometimes that job of summarizing something, we in our industry, we call that a proposition statement. And it can be a really interesting exercise to get the team together and all have a guess at how you would summarize the thing that you're working on and see where the inconsistencies lie. That's a big part of the beginnings of a project like the one that we're talking about today. So looking at these 2 stories, the one in our fictional place and this one in London, I'm stood here talking to you, and my job title is a content strategist, and she's out there in the world with her 6-year-old daughter, campaigning for the rights of children to education. So we need to bridge that gap. So we're looking for these things. And I'm going to talk to you about how we go about looking for some of these things. It's basically my job to find that language and build the tools that she needs to be able to carry out her business. So we've come across this a little bit earlier in Hamish's talk. In order to communicate across cultures, we need to build up a level of empathy for our user. It seems harsh, now that we've come so far on the story, to call this girl our user. But that's what seems to happen. We lump people together to be audiences, users, or customers. The more specific you can be about an individual who symbolizes many use cases, the more empathic your outcomes will be. When we're designing for user experience, when we're designing, as Clear Left, when we, as Clear Left, are designing for user experiences, we often create something called personas. You might have used personas in your work before. Could I get a little show of hands if anybody's used a persona before? Ah, this is great. OK, so here's a persona that we created at Clear Left. This is an authentic one. Please don't retweet this one. Thank you. This is yeah, so I'm just going to give you a little minute to a sort of guided tour of our persona. The persona comes in two parts, and this is page 1. So we've been thinking about his location, and we build up a little story about him, and we look at the various needs that he has, the various technology that he has access to, and then we get a little bit deeper into his needs, and his access requirements are up there, and then his goals. And then these are like our top three requirements. So if you just need to dip in and make sure that everything's on track, this is quite a good way of showing it. So a persona like this is really great if somebody new joins the project, which often happens. You know, if projects go on for a length of time, new people often join, and it's difficult to articulate the essence of what you're trying to achieve. So personas are a really great communication tool within teams. And in our case, it helps us make sure that we're understanding our clients' users' needs as well. So here's one that's a little bit closer to the character that we've just been talking about, Joy. And we've pretty much done the same thing for her. And this is your regular kind of user experience design persona. This is like the textbooks. There's one book called, I think it's Value Proposition Design by a guy called Doug. The company's called Strategists. And he has formulas and ways and templates that can help you get to this kind of stuff. But we'll go into that in a little bit. So the second part of this persona is a little bit unusual for user experience designers, and a little bit unusual in terms of like the design thinking process, because it's very message heavy. It's very directed towards building a checklist of all the requirements we have for content. So I'll just give you a little minute to have a read. Can you read that from where you are? No? Okay. Well, I'll zoom in. Okay. So this is literally taken from those two paragraphs there. So Joy wants to feel like she has agency and that she's been given the right tools to make change happen in her community. She needs to know that she is not putting herself in danger, with strong advice on how to stay safe in her communications. So this persona allows anyone on the team to gain instant empathy for the audiences you're working with. To create an effective persona, you need to base it as much on research as possible. Try to get hold of actual users, interview them, ask them to conduct diary studies. There are a number of ways that you can conduct user research. Ask them to fill out profiles of their experience with their friends, perhaps. I'm not going to go into how to do user research right now, but you get the idea. So here's the bit where I want to issue a word of warning. It can be tempting to give this job of finding language or branding or looking at the communications messages to a branding agency or to the communications department or the marketing department or any of those kind of departments that have external facing kind of responsibilities. But what we're trying to work out here is your set of core messages, your principles, your value, and your purpose in building the products and services that you are building. So all of those strategic anchors that give rise to an experience of a product, basically. The strategic anchors and the language that you choose needs to connect with users. So I actually, as I was writing this talk, I came across this on Twitter, and I really hope nobody's insulted. The conversation does go on, so you can, if you look on Twitter for this person, yeah, I was quite amused with that. So basically what I'm saying is that Joy, who is in our persona, she's not going to care, nor is she going to trust you if her tools and her language comes from an absent body that doesn't speak to her in her language, in her tone of voice. So let's look at that. So PowerPoint has done a funny thing, and that's not meant to be circled. It's the words "stay safe," which are in bold. I love that. How? Right. So let's look at the word safety, or stay safe, and not the word how. This concept is a major concern for Joy. In fact, somebody mentioned it earlier, creating a safe space. So it's a word that is important to her. But if you choose it as an anchor for your branding process or your design process, it has an impact at many different levels. So safety can be a value that the organization upholds, meaning that staff, volunteers, partners, and campaigners may be given acute awareness of safety when they join. Safety can be a user requirement, which may have an effect on the interface. Safety, because it's fundamental to the brand and Joy's needs, might feature in the main navigation even, so that she can find the tools that she needs to stay safe. The words "stay safe" can be used regularly throughout the copy and content, even on social media. It might even be used as microcopy on a button or a link. Placing emphasis on safety might also even qualify for becoming a design principle or a content principle. These principles tell us whether content can be included or not, so it's a decision-making tool for content. Safety is also a differentiator. It helps you stand out from the crowd. If anyone here has worked in the non-profit sector, you'll be aware that needing to stand out and not get lost in the sea of noise is particularly challenging. So you can see how just this one word that we've sort of harvested from our research process is not a dead word stuck in a branding document or a tone of voice guide somewhere. It's up to the entire team, no matter who you are, to discover the words and thread them throughout the content and the interface. This kind of language is then a benchmark for decision-making. It informs the end product and the experience. So you might hear things like, well, that new recruit didn't seem to have much regard for the safety of our campaigners in the interview. He was a little too activistic. Or there's a gap in the toolkit. We need some clear guidelines on writing a blog that's not going to get you into trouble with your community. So these quotes are hypothetical, not from my client's work. So I'm going to take you through one more scenario to help you understand how we go about discovering this language and working with it as the strategic building blocks of design and for communicating messages. Anybody know what this animal is? It's a lemur, yes. Very good. Good wildlife recognition skills. Right. So so this project was with a company that I can name. It was called Natural World Safaris. So I'm just lifting it out of the education context for a second, for a breather. With Natural World Safaris, I had a bit of a problem because Natural World Safaris sell holidays that cost approximately £7,000. And when I arrived, I really could not understand why a holiday should cost £7,000 to go and see a lemur. So, user research. The problem I had was that their website, their existing website, talked about going off with a tour guide, and then you'd go with a tour guide, and the tour guide would show you the lemurs, and you'd probably be in a little bus. And I just thought, that's just like a package holiday. Like, that still doesn't warrant £7,000. Right. So what I was going to do was I was going to get you to stand in the shoes of the Natural World Safaris people, but I'm actually going to change my mind, and I'm going to get you to work through a set of questions, and then we'll come back to Natural World Safaris on your own project. So I'm going to give you the 5 questions that I asked in the stakeholder interviews, and I'll give you what their answer was later, but you're going to do it for yourself now. So this, let's see how we're doing for time. OK, we've got enough time. So we're going to spend a good 10 minutes working on this task for ourselves, OK? So there's 5 questions, of which this is the first. So I'll take you through them one at a time. And this is a set of questions that I always ask. And every time I fail to ask them, I land myself in a sticky situation. So I totally rely on these questions. For the last sort of 6 years I've been using them, and they've really, really helped me. Anytime I want to write a blog post, anytime I'm in a stakeholder interview, I just go through these questions. So they're precious. Right. So think of a project that you're working on, something that you need a little bit of clarity on. Perhaps the thing that you answered the questions for earlier, like, is it confusing? How do I summarize it? That kind of thing. Okay? If you've got something in mind, just tell the person next to you what the project is. They can hold you accountable. If you can't think of anything, I'll give you a suggestion. Maybe do it as if you were the inventor of an eco kettle. Okay? Bit random, but it works. Or a pair of jeans. Yeah? Okay. So tell the person next to you what you're going to work on. If they're having trouble, give them a suggestion. Okay, great. So now, just for yourself, on your piece of paper or on your device, devices aren't always like that anymore, are they? They're on your device. What problems or needs do users have? So take out holiday that this product, service, tool, whatever it is, can solve. So if it's a pair of jeans or an eco kettle, put that in there. What problems or needs do the users have that this holiday can solve? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. You can always come back and fill this in if you think of another one. What skepticisms do they have? This is a really good one for getting into your users' shoes. What skepticisms do they have?
The IT department. There's a C, not a K.
Okay, I'm moving on to the next one. So obviously we're swapping it out. So what's different now that this service, product, pair of jeans, eco kettle has come along? What's different now? So this is a really good one about standing out against the noise. So if you've got a billion, other people shouting the same message, what's different now that you've come along? Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. So this one can be either, if you're a visually minded person, you might want to literally draw a pretty picture, or you can write a pretty picture of the end result. So this is like now that I've been on my holiday, or now I'm on my holiday, here are the I can't speak anymore. Here are the holiday snaps. Here's me with the lemurs. Yeah, you get the picture. So what's the pretty picture now that it's in use? Thank you. Okay. Thanks very much. Thank you. I love that sound of general banter in the room, and I hate stopping it. So these questions help you get into your user's shoes. I would hesitate not to get them tested in the outside world, because what you've done now is make assumptions, and that gets you a certain amount of the way. In fact, when I'm writing a blog post, I rarely, want to ring up all the various people that are going to read my blog post. I can make certain assumptions about my audience. But if you're investing a whole lot of money into a new tool or something, it's really important to get these assumptions tested. Does anybody have any questions about that process? While we're here. Nope. Okay. Yeah, so you can hopefully, if you look back over your notes, you can hopefully see how synthesizing some of that language will give rise to some of the stuff that we talked about earlier, i.e. that word safety. You might find words in there about trust and safety, things that are very fundamental to your brand. And it's worth picking those out and making something of them, because those are going to be the fundamental building blocks of all your interface design and your messaging, just as we talked about earlier. So let's come back to the lemurs, to natural world safaris. So we had a meeting, and this is a quote from the client in that workshop. And the really lovely thing about going through this process is that people use very plain language to articulate simple concepts. So while his website said tour guides and all this kind of fancy language about holidays, he just said this. So they want an extraordinary experience. They want to see something rare, so we take them to the right place at the right time. Our specialists know where and when to find those little or big natural wonders. That's not a normal travel agency. So I peeled out of that the word specialists. I was like, oh, he's calling them specialists, not travel guides. That's a very different kind of vocabulary, isn't it? And also, I peeled out of it the right place at the right time. It's not just any time of year. In fact, that picture that I showed you earlier of the lemurs with the little lemur babies are only born at a certain time of year. So the specialists know how to get you to the lemur babies so that you don't disturb their habitat, etc., etc. So that's very, very specific stuff. So it starts to become clear why a holiday might be between £7,000 and £10,000. So I'm going to show you how that then manifested later on in the website messaging. Oh, hey, it circled the right bit. So this is their website. So you can see how that, basically what he said, plain speakingly, in that meeting, turned into brand language that appeared on the website. And then we've got the destination specialists, so the people who were the tour guides have become specialists, because they are specialists. So now it's nearly time for me to end. I hope it's been an interesting journey for you, and also I'll look forward to your feedback or questions on Twitter. So it's walking on your path to work that gives you the opportunity to choose how you will use your voice. to change your strategy, to influence the direction of the stuff that you're producing, to form your tribe or your club and have your influence. Even if you're not a words person, even if you're not the branding agency or the information architect or the content strategist or the person who decides on the strategy, you have a responsibility to the rest of the humans around you, your team, to ask the right questions and to pick up on the words which make sense to everyone. It's all our responsibilities to develop clear and inspiring language. The clarity and consistency of your language can make or break a relationship, a brand, a user experience, the longevity of your interfaces, the usability of your tools. It's our responsibility to create an authentic language, to tell a story that communicates across communities, across countries, across platforms, and across tools. It's your voice too, your vocabulary to choose from, your personal language. Make it easy to understand, make it human, make it heard. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely fabulous. Thank you very much, Ellen. Questions, anyone?
I have a question. Ellen, were they called specialists at that time or at the travel agency, or was it when you picked it up from what he said that they then later became specialists?
So their job titles were guides and tour guides. So we changed their job titles. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's not just a digital thing.
Yeah, because that
picking
up from the language can help you find, you know, something that's more relevant and means more to the audience that you're trying to reach.
Exactly. We have a habit of getting stuck in you know, our old ways. Our patterns become invisible. So sometimes it helps to get someone in from the outside to have a look at, you know, the language that you're using, because you wouldn't notice. Like at the beginning of this talk, it was mentioned that I put IA in my, you know, that's so familiar to me. So it was really good to have it pointed out that actually I used an acronym. Sorry about that.
And I think in, like, a lot of people's roles in this room probably, like, I've been an academic technologist, but I'm also, right now, I'm a learning technologies advisor, and they're the same thing. But actually, like, I remember having a lot more issues with academic technologists as a role and how it was understood.
Yeah.
Because people would say, oh, well, how are you academic? Like, what does that mean? Whereas, like, if you facilitate learning, it's more understood. So it's just interesting how these things...
Yeah, job titles are a really fascinating one, and yeah, I get quite het up about them sometimes. In general, when I work with clients, the more you distill something down, the less meaning it holds, I guess. So I always say it takes as long as it takes to tell a story. But it is important to find the right kind of gateway language. It's like the gate into the garden. Like, once you're in the garden, I can show you all the flowers, but, you know, how welcoming is that gate? So job titles is one of them, and Content Strategist doesn't really do it for me, so I try to avoid mentioning it as much as possible. But, yeah, so language specialist means a little bit more, I suppose. Yeah. So think about your gateway language. It's not going to be the most satisfying language, but you'll have the, if it is a little bit satisfying, you'll have the opportunity to introduce yourself further.
Fantastic.
Any more questions?
It's not really a question, it's more of a kind of a total agreement of what the sort of things you were saying, because within my own project, when I started, we did not have a shared understanding. Using many of the kind of techniques you've just been talking about helped us to ensure that we had a shared description and shared understanding of what we were trying to do, and we weren't going off on different tangents. That thing about using personas, user stories, and actually it was probably a result of that we did change the name of our kind of what was going to be called a diagnostic tool to a discovery tool, because it was that very much talking to end users as well. So just saying, you know, really interesting presentation and very much echoes some of the stuff that we've done.
Yeah. Can I just say something on that, actually? So in terms of finding that shared language, there's a really, really simple task that I do with clients. Because people can be scared. If somebody comes into the room and says, I'm a learning technologist, Like, I don't actually know what that means, but I'd be too scared to say. So when you're working together with a new team, just get all that language out onto cards and start writing the definitions. You'll be surprised at how many conflicts of definitions and misunderstandings there are. But if you're going to work together effectively, it's just a simple thing to do. Put any language that may or may not be ambiguous onto separate index cards and work on those definitions together.
Do you ever get involved in changing language, or is it just developing new language content?
So language is intrinsically connected to cultures. So I prefer to not look at it as a digital project, but sometimes branding and language decision-making happens because a digital project comes along. It's hard to change cultures, but when people start to see the difficulties, for example, with like arguments around navigation buttons and things, sometimes the website navigation or a tool's navigation retrospectively changes the way things are labeled within the organization. Yeah.